today. So welcome, Mary.
All right, good morning, and thanks for participating. OSHA has a agency priority goal on trenching, so this is great that I was allowed an opportunity to talk with you and that you're willing to participate. I've been with OSHA for 36 years. 20 of them I was doing compliance work, so actually going out and doing the inspections. The last 16 have been doing outreach as a compliance assistant specialist. My role is to answer questions that the general public, employers have, employees go through conferences, try to get the word out so that prevention is obviously what we're focused on versus writing tickets and doing enforcement. And God forbid, we don't want to be there after a fatality or an accident. So we would really like to have people understand the standards, get with us if they have any questions, and use this opportunity to kind of grow your safety and health program. I am certifiable in safety and health. And when I was doing inspections, I did over 1,000 of them. I do come from the Antigo-Wausau area. My dad grew up on a dairy farm. My dad did a plumbing, heating, electrical business. So I kind of know the world a little bit. I knew what he was working on that day because we either had the barn smell or fuel oil or a septic tank. So we kind of got around that, the world that you guys live in, and do appreciate the work that is being done there. Got to say, you can't hold anything I say against me. It's being recorded, so I have to be careful what I say. So what we're going to do is just kind of give you some of the OSHA updates and how we do inspections, and then the penalties. The penalties have really increased in the last year or so, and it is tied into inflation. So guess what's going to happen next year? We're going to talk about the cited items in construction, and particularly excavation. Talk about a few accidents, talk about the initiative, and then get some of your resources that you can use to improve your safety and health program, keep you out of trouble. So the first thing you need to know is if you do have that day, your worst day of an employer's career is when they have to call someone and a family member and say your loved one's not coming home that day. But if you do have an employee that gets killed on the job, or an employee that has a hospitalization, amputation, or loss of eye, you have to report that, actually pick up the phone or fill out the online form, but you have to tell OSHA, and the timeline is 8 hours on a fatality, 24 hours on a hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye. You can do that during the normal business hours and call your local OSHA office. We do have a 24/7, 365 hotline that you can call, and they would direct it to the appropriate office, or you can do it online, and that would give you a time date confirmation that you reported it within the appropriate amount of time. We are quite serious about the number of the timeline that does expire. I took a concern yesterday that the employee passed away in October of 2020, and the family member was wondering whether that was ever reported. So we do need to keep those timely. One of the things that we do look at when we talk about getting to inspections, besides the reported accidents, is what we call a referral. So this can come from the local county state inspectors if they're out on a site and they see employees exposed to a hazard. And we also get it through the EMS. So sometimes a group responds to a cave-in or some sort of accident. They do tell us news articles, and the photo that you're looking at, came through Facebook. Obviously not your most trusted source, but a company was doing an expansion and they were really proud of their expansion work. So they took a picture of the contractor, and that was, it generated, by the time we got to it, it was after the trench was closed and the company was off site, but it did generate a phone and fax complaint in which the company had to respond to us on what happened. Initially the company said, oh, that wasn't us, we didn't do that. And then, my employees said it wasn't like that. And then we showed them pictures, and so they went back and found out that the employees maybe didn't tell the boss exactly what was happening. But we do look for hard hats in a trench. We look for the sloping or trench box. We look for the distance around the spoil pile. We do evaluate any of the struck by hazards by having a excavator up against a building that could create a pinch point there. So there's a number of things with that we would have looked at had we done the inspection, but we did address it in some manner by making the employer aware that we know they need to be doing a better job, even though because it was after the fact, we can't cite off of other people's photos. Not to give you a secrets on how to get away from an OSHA inspection, but if somebody's out taking photos and everybody's got cameras, that is something to be concerned about or aware of. So how we get to sites, first thing is an imminent danger. So this trenching emphasis program, our agency priority goal, has elevated trenching to the point of if we see a dirt pile, we'll stop. You can have the trench box, have your spoil pile under control, everything else, we'll still stop. If it is all under control, we say, thanks, have a great day, appreciate your compliance, and we walk away. If it's not in compliance, then the inspection would be initiated. Other imminent dangers would be if you had people on the roadway without proper road markings, so your traffic control isn't adequate to protect the employees. If you had people in fall distance, so typically in the imminent danger, if we see somebody on a roof without fall protection, that's where we would stop. But in trenching, if we see a dirt pile, we'll stop. Our second priority would be the fatalities or the report of the serious injuries. So this is after something happened. So that's why we try to get there before in the imminent danger. If it doesn't, if we get reported case, then we will go out, and that's prioritized over an employee complaint or a referral. So employees can file a complaint through our website. They can call the local OSHA office. They can write us a letter, mail it, fax it, whatever they want to do. And if it's a signed complaint, and we would initiate an inspection. We do not give employers the name of the complainant. Typically, it's a small crew. Sometimes you figure out who had filed the complaint, and you cannot retaliate against an employee who exercised their rights under OSHA. There's a different investigator that does look at whistleblower protections within our office, but we would look at the complaint items and anything else in plain view once we're there. We do programmed inspections, and so for construction, that would be larger projects that have some sort of duration, more than a dig a trench, put a water line in, and walk away. So those would be hospitals, schools, big utility projects that are let bid, usually government contracts. So what we do once an inspection is initiated is present credentials to the employer. And if you have a lead person on site, they are acting as the employer. They're directing activity. Therefore, we consider them an extension of the employer, even though they don't own the company. So if you do have, someone who's in charge of your crew, and you do have an OSHA inspection, just kind of let them know how you would like them to handle it. Usually, we do not have the ability to wait, but there are some things that, they could call you and get you to the site if you're out bidding jobs or doing something else. But we do need to initiate the inspection. And once we initiate the inspection, we need to keep proceeding. So we do have credentials. If you suspect that the person's false, not really with OSHA, you can always call the area office. We have what's called an opening conference. We discuss the parameters of the inspection, which would be the reason why we're there, We have to have a reason. If anybody deals with MSHA, they have the ability to just stop at a site and do an inspection. We have to have a reason, and we'll tell you what the scope is. And generally, these sites are everything we see, everything that's there. If we were in a major manufacturing, we may limit it to one department, depending on what the complaint item or the reason why we're there. At the opening, the ground rules are we interview employees, and we can do that in private. We take photographs, measurements, soil samples. We do want to see your safety and health program, which tends to get us back to contacting the office once the inspection's done on site, so that we can validate that you do have some sort of safety training, and employees are getting personal protective equipment and all the things that they need. We'll do the walk around, which a lot of times we're standing right there, and we do the photographs, measurements, whatever of the trench, get the model number of the excavator, and talk with the employees. At the end of the walk around, we have a closing conference, so we'll discuss what we find with the employer and tell them what their options are after the citation's issued. So the case file is written up, and then the employer, the case file goes to the area director. The area director will review the case file and sign off on the citations to be issued. The citations get mailed to the office, and it comes as a return receipt, a green card. So it will have the date in which the company received the citation, and the company has 15 working days to respond to the citation if they want to do any modifications. So one of the common things that, and we actually recommend people do, is to have what's called the informal conference. And it is just that. You don't need an attorney. We're doing them virtually, so that we're not to observe COVID protocols. And at that time, anything can be discussed on the citation: the penalty, the classification, the item itself, the abatement date. And we do have the ability to make pen and hand changes and adjust the citation if there's a valid reason to do so. If you just want to contest and exercise your contest right, or if you go to and participate in the conference and aren't satisfied with the result, then you can go to the contest procedure. Either or, you have to have that worked out or done or the notice of contest or the informal conference settlement agreement done within 15 working days. Otherwise, it becomes final order. Once it's contested, it can go on for a period of time. It goes to our attorneys in Chicago, and they can settle things formally, so it doesn't necessarily have to go to court. I did about 1,000 inspections, maybe 50 to 75 were contested. I only went to court once. So we would rather not tire people up in court in doing preparation. We would rather have our enforcement people out doing enforcement and settle cases and move on with life. But here's kind of one of the sticklers in what's happening in the OSHA world is that we're 50 years old. We had one penalty adjustment in the 90s, and the second time we adjusted penalties was 2016. The 2016 adjustment said, well, we shouldn't go that long between adjusting. We'll just have the penalties adjusted for inflation. So it could technically go down, but with the inflation rate, especially at the end of 2021, the penalties went up $849. And typically they've been right around $150, $200 every year. They've been inching up. It took a big leap. So in 2023, that's going to be a huge number. And those are per item or per violation, depending on the category. A lot of construction companies, a lot of people that have a lot of visibility are really concerned about the repeated classification. And a repeated violation is a standard that's been violated within the past 5 years. So if you think of your driving history in 3 years and you go, oh my God, when's that ticket going to drop off? You have 5 years for that item to be available as a basis of a repeated violation. And that $145,000 is a very significant number. So now that I scared you with that number, there is some adjustments that are done before you even see the citation. And we do take into account what is the situation. That's why we interview employees. That's why we ask a lot of questions, is what is the severity and the probability? Unfortunately, in the trenching world, the severity, if even a bucket full of dirt falls onto an employee, it's a severe injury, if not a fatality. If the whole sidewall caves in, the person's dead. The probability, because these things happen in a moment's time, is high. If you have Class C soil, there's no sloping being done. We got some water, we got some fissures. It's going to be issued at the high. If we have other types of violations where you have a utility knife and you could cut yourself, and the results would be stitches. You get stitches, you're going to heal. There's no long-term damage. That could be a low lesser. So the penalty, gravity-based penalty, would start at $6,000. So we do take in account the situation. That's why the type of questions the inspector asks are critical. The other thing that we do have the ability to use is the size of the company. Typically in your industry, the number of employees are on the low side or few employees. You're not a major excavating contractors that are doing sewer work in cities. So you get it, if you have 10 or fewer employees, you get an 80% reduction off of that 14,000 or off this 6,000. So that's a big chunk of change that comes off of that penalty. We can also adjust for history. If you've never been inspected before, we can give you a 10% reduction. But if you've been inspected before, cited, we can add to the penalty. The good faith is our review of your safety and health program. So if you have a good safety and health program, you can get 15 to 25% off the penalty there. So there are some factors that go into before you actually see that dollar value, but you don't want to be working for free. You don't want to be working your next 10 jobs to be paying for an OSHA citation. So, the penalties have gotten significant enough where I think people are understanding that sometimes it's better to take a step back and reconsider what you're doing, because for $14,000, you could probably wait until the next day until things get sorted out on what would be the safer way to proceed. One thing OSHA can do is called multi-employer worksite policy. So we have utilized this quite a bit. If you do a large job and it has a general contractor, they will ensure that whatever you do is done safely, because they could get cited for it. So they'll point out things that you need to be doing better and not exposing the whole group to. The city, county, if you're a county inspector, your group that controls your safety is Department of Safety and Professional Services, and they do have a group that does inspections for your entity. So you could be exposed to a trench that somebody else dug, and if you got buried in that trench, OSHA wouldn't have jurisdiction. It would be DSPS. So there is a division there, but you do have people that you can call and talk with, try to get the program together and means and methods of acting safely. The other thing that you can do is you can submit a referral to the OSHA office on the contractor if there are issues. So where we've used the multi-employer worksite policy, this was a number of years ago up in Elmina, up in my area. And the sheriff's department took the photos, but you can see that the trench is no wider than the bucket. and as it not as any goes from track to track. And they got to a point where they had previously disturbed soil, so it was a backfilled water pipe. And when they got to that point, it sloughed away or collapsed. And one person had a broken jaw, dislocated shoulder. There were 2 people down there. The other person was just bruises and stuff, but it could have been much more significant. We did cite the excavating operator and company, and then the plumbing company for that, because one created, the other caused. So I know a lot in the way my dad's business ran is, he didn't have an excavator, so he was relying on the digger to be doing their job, and sometimes had, talked about putting up with stuff that he didn't care for. But you have to have that working relationship with your excavating contractor of what you're going to accept. We used to have an office in downtown Eau Claire. We got the best photos. I was just across the street, riding buckets, doing stuff like that. Everybody, if that's a plumbing contractor and that's the excavating company that's allowing him to ride the bucket out, there would be 2 violations there. A lot of times in regular construction, we see the electrical boxes open and they're energized. So to imagine, I opened that door and was like, that's live. So we can cite who created the problem, who has exposed employees to the problem, who is supposed to correct it, and who has oversight. So that has cleaned up a lot of the construction industry quite a bit. Okay, getting to the trenching itself. A lot of ways, there's a lot of posters, there's a lot of initiatives out there, but the you put machines on the edge of that trench, if you're creating a mini earthquake. All that vibration, all that movement, it's adding to the stress of that wall. The spoil pile needs to be 2 feet back. Any trench deeper than 5 feet needs to have some sort of protective measure. And no hard hat on there. An observer, that's probably not the biggest thing, but if that wall gives way, they're gone. And then they need a means of getting in and out of the trench. Often on the right hand side is they're usually recoveries rather than rescues, and it's you can YouTube a number of things and find out the and see people trying to dig people with the excavator bucket. You just cringe if somebody's buried. Puts rescue groups into a very difficult position. And the other thing that we look at in trenching excavation, it's not so much unless you're doing into any of the pit work, but you can have a hazardous atmosphere in which you could be overcome by the gases. We had 4 people overcome in this pit in 2007 in Superior. It was a landfill leachate pit. Guys had been working in there for several hours, and then the one guy collapsed, the brother went in, and then somebody else went in, and the 4th guy said to the 5th guy, go call 911, and he went in and he didn't make it out either. So we want to make sure we look at your hazardous atmospheres. So I didn't update this one, but it just shows that plumbing contractors, there's a number of utility fatalities that do occur, and it is something to be aware of quite a bit. Self-employed is another number they track. And so that's, if you're a small business or your own entity, it is very possible to get killed in your own work or your own trench. Okay, so for the things that we do cite, again, imminent danger, things we see from the roadside are what creates a lot of the stops or inspections for construction. So we see people on the edge of the roof. We can't see if they don't have a ground pin on their extension cord from the roadside. So fall protection is always going to be on this top list. Hand and face protection, get your hard hats. But number 8 is the trenching issues and concerns. So when we look at each specific trenching violation, it's protection, not having adequate protection, not having a means of egress in and out. having daily inspections, so that's your competent person, the 2 feet around for the spoil pile, and another competent person variation, and then protecting from water. So it is cited quite a bit throughout the nation, and it is something that we are looking at. So it is one of the most hazardous construction operations, and cave-ins are the #1 cause of the issue. So something that we think about in construction is we call the focus 4. These 4 items contribute to nearly all of the fatalities or serious injuries. So falls, struck by electrical, and caught in between. So when a trench wall collapses, we call that caught in between the trench walls. And struck by could be hit by the excavating counterweight. I don't do videos when I do virtual because it's a curse of death, but this is something that for some reason somebody was videoing this, and they were clamshelling out the area, and they were getting below the concrete ring, and the guy in the pink shirt, when they got removed the soil, the replacement soil came from underneath his feet, and he got sucked down in there, and the guy in the gray shirt grabbed onto the clamshell, and that's what saved him. But the guy in the pink shirt didn't make it out of there. Here's another accident that we had investigated in the Madison office. It wasn't that deep, 6'8", but it was also for a septic tank application, and just a little bit came in. The worker was injured, but he did make it out. This was a fatality in the Eau Claire area where the sidewall, it was a water line they were putting in. And so it was a pre-existing water line, and the dirt fell away, and it didn't totally collapse, but it was enough to kill a young individual. So when we look at our trenching fatalities, and the reason for having this emphasis program is that we had 17, we were, that's 17 too many. And then we popped up to 36 and a whole big number of fatalities. So we've been on this, getting this agency priority goal for a couple years. So hopefully we're seeing a trend down. I know that we're seeing, we saw 0 trenching collapses in Region 5 in 2021. So I call that lucky. I don't say that we did all this great initiative. Hopefully people are doing a better job, and they're taking it seriously. So single family dwellings, duplex, 24% of the fatalities are coming from that area. Pipeline, road work. So 53% come from that area. So the single family dwelling is in septic tank work is the highest risk. So we have their initiative. We're to reinforce the proven protective measures, make sure you get some trench box, some shoring, some method that is preventing the collapse. And our initiative came in effect October 18, and it's enforcement, but also compliance assistance. So we've done a lot of outreach trying to get the word out on this. One of the things we do in the month of June is work with other groups and associations, and we have trenching stand downs. So compliance officers and myself actually go out to trench sites, meet with the employer and the employees, and talk through what they're doing that day. It's by appointment. There's no enforcement. It's really kind of a cool way of us understanding their role and how difficult it is, and dealing with anything underground nowadays, especially a city utility or a city street doing utility work. You got gas, fiber optic, anything electrical underground. It is just getting very busy under there, and truly needs to appreciate the work people do. So our mantra, or what we came out with, is 5 things you need to know to stay safe. So if you're to we're to ask employees on their interviews, well, what do you need to do to stay safe? If they could do 3 out of 5, I think we win. Sometimes I have to think them through. So make sure you have a safe in and out, make sure the trench is protected, keep the materials away from the edge, look for standing water or other atmospheric issues, and don't enter unless it's inspected. So the first one, safe in and out. You have to have every 25 feet a means of getting in and out. So a ladder, and a ladder has to extend 3 feet above for every 25 feet. And this starts at if the trench is deeper than 4 feet. A lot of times if you have an electrical trench where you're just standing in there, you know, your butt's on the edge, you're really not, it's not deep enough to put a ladder. You don't need a ladder. The other thing is if the excavator operator leaves you a ramp at the end where it's sloped up where you can walk upright, that's considered an exit. So if it's if you have to use all 4s to get up and crawl up, it's not sufficient. If you can stand up and walk out, that's considered 1. So every 25 feet, make sure they extend 3 feet up. This is the one that was cited the most, is the cave-in protection. Surprised they didn't put this number 1, but this is their numbering system. So sloping, benching, you can't bench Class C. Almost all of Wisconsin is Class C unless you get up to the Lake Superior area. If you're sloping, it's 1.5 to 1. So for every foot over at the toe of the trench, not the center line of the trench. So the wider you are, the farther out you have to be. You have to be 1 foot up. For every 1 foot over, you have to be 1.5 feet up. So if you're 5 feet deep, you have to be 7.5 feet wide on that side, plus what your working space is, the depth of the trench, and then also 7.5 feet on the other side. You don't have that much room anymore in this world. If you're in somebody's backyard, they have bushes, trees, you got all kinds of things that you're not able to dig. So sloping has become less and less of an option unless you're in a very brand new development. You have no underground obstacles, you have no overhead, no sidewalks, you have nothing, no buildings to deal with. So if you can get there to a development site before everybody else gets there, that's usually the optimum time. You can slope it out, you can do everything that you need. If after that, then you have the trench box or the shoring. So there's a lot of different hydraulic shorings that they are trying to implement. Some speed shoring might be a trade name, but you can drop down the aluminum plates, and again, aluminum, you can handle them without a machine, and then put in the bracing, hydraulic bracing from above, and then you're protected when you go into the trench. And to remove it, you get out of the trench, and then you remove the bracing, and then you remove the panels, and it's pretty quick, pretty slick. And you can put it in the area that you're working and protect the area that you're working. Ran across a plumbing contractor in our area last year, and they had one of the systems that was on the trailer, and they were digging a trench, and they just found the pipe that they were looking for. They were up against the highway, and it was just a circular, deep, 7-8 foot deep, but not very wide. Wasn't wide at all. And the guy goes, "Now we're going to put the trench box or the shielding in because we just found the pipe." But it's chicken or the egg. You got to kind of get the shoring protection in before the employee enters the trench. So we got a number of times where the bottom, this is us trying to describe on the left side, where the bottom gets too wide. That makes you have to get very, very wide on the top, water coming in. The other thing is try to minimize the number of people doing any high-risk activity. We don't like to see people in high-risk activity. I like to see that mitigated down to a lower or medium risk. But, you know, having people stand around watching what's going on, if something does go bad, you just have more victims. The picture on the right does show some of those various options on the speed shoring and ability to get work done. You know, not everything's perfect. Probably on the wall with the ladder, you probably want that lower panel to be uh, covering down to the ground. You have 2 feet that you can be above uh, because that bottom can kick out into the trench too. Some of the easier stuff, keep everything 2 feet or more away. That extra weight on the edge of the trench can cause it to collapse. You might have rocks on the top of the pile that might start to tumble down in and take the direct route into the trench itself. Plus, a lot of times people need to maneuver around the trench. That gives them a walkway to do so. Standing water, try to make sure you've got some pumps or some system to remove the water if you need to be working in there or let it drain. So we talked about the depths. So where the guy is, it looks like it's at waist deep. So he really wouldn't need ladders if it's less than 5 feet and he deemed it stable. He wouldn't need a protective system. But getting down into the hole that they're digging into, that's definitely something that we would look for exits, shoring, protection, and getting rid of the water accumulation. Make sure everything's inspected. This is where the term competent person comes in. A lot of people know what a trench should look like. They have information. You soil test it. Soil testers can tell you exactly silty loam and class C or B or whatever. But the true test of a competent person is the authority to immediately eliminate the hazard. And that comes from the employer. So if the employer says, get it dug, I don't care how, it has to get done by 4 o'clock. And the employee, the competent person just says, it's got to get done. They aren't competent because they can't change or correct or eliminate the hazard, stop the job because the employer hasn't given them that authority. When we ask competent people for their requirements, it's have specific training and knowledge. And it really isn't any, it can be previous experience, it can be, you know, knowing what the different protective measures is, you know, it's kind of like an accumulation of a resume. So any courses that are taken, any there is competent person's training for trenching that is an actual course. If you took that, that's certainly good information to support the fact that this person could be your competent person. We need to have a daily inspection prior to start of work. It is needed throughout the shift if there's changing conditions like a rainstorm or you running into different obstacles, different, you know, a gas line or something you didn't anticipate. So make sure you have a safe in and out, make sure it's protected from cave-ins, make sure you got enough material stored away. Water atmospheric issues, don't enter a trench unless it's been inspected. So sometimes we talked about the social media. I was going on people's websites. So the guy is like, I've provide the plumber with a neat workspace to complete the hookup from the house, and they're trying to promote that. And it's like, well, if you're down on your knees right down there, that could certainly collapse on you, but you can see the tight space where you would need to be able to use some sort of, you could use some sort of shoring, but you certainly couldn't slope that out to the standards requirement. The ladder in the trench needs to extend 3 feet out. So taking a lean up 4-foot ladder isn't sufficient in that case. Spoil pile is back, so it isn't that bad. And I just grabbed the stat. I know it's 2000, but Texas had over half of their fatalities were trenches that are 5 feet or less. And you have to remember, you're working on your knees, you're bent over. Any dirt coming into the trench is going to hit your head and neck and affect you that way. So I was at doing a presentation, and we were able to set up this little display. So the amount of dirt that you kind of think of that you'd have to move. So we're showing 1-to-1 on the left side. So for every foot up, we went 1 foot over. And we're measuring from the 2x4s out, not the center of the trench. And so you can see how much dirt has to get moved versus the center line there that has just the bucket width. And if you put a trench box or shoring in there, that it would minimize the amount of digging you need to do. So this much dirt needs to get removed, or if it's 1-to-1, you have to go out to the light blue, or 1.5-to-1 would be the farther out. So that's a lot of dirt. There's not that much space to work with in people's yards, or once you start getting into city streets. We'll talk a little bit about confined space entry using, we do have a compliance guidebook. We did implement this in mid 2015s or something like that. And it does follow a lot of what the general industry has, but it is very procedural minded, and you need to have all the steps to make it effective. Picture on the right was from the Milwaukee Journal. I think it was outside of Miller Park. And that's the boss that's got his ankles being held. So a lot of employees would like a day where they could hold the employer's ankles. But the ladder wouldn't fit down. And if you put the ladder in that hole, you couldn't climb down if you were a normal sized person, because there's just isn't enough room because it cuts the hole in half. So bad planning. So we do get and again, some of these are dated, but you do find them, a couple of them every year, where people work in an underground septic system and felt weak, passed out. And sometimes if somebody tries to rescue somebody in a confined space, they are likely to be overcome too. In this case, the person was pulled to safety. This one was 2 people, one went in, the other tried to help. And hydrogen sulfide is a lot of times the culprit, and sometimes it's methane, but hydrogen sulfide gets trapped in sludge. And as you step on it, work it, whatever, it gets disrupted, then the hydrogen sulfide gets liberated. And it doesn't take a lot of hydrogen sulfide. Everybody thinks, oh, I can smell the rotten eggs. You can smell it to a certain point, then your senses go numb and it doesn't smell anymore. So again, a little bit of a dated statistic, that NIOSH said 60% of the confined space fatalities were the would-be rescuers. So that's why we're really adamant about having retrieval systems, having a harness on when you go into a space with a lifeline and some means of lifting. Even with a harness and a lanyard, a very strong individual cannot pull a 150-pound person complete dead weight out of a hole unless they had some sort of mechanical device. Again, they had the 4 people that died in the Superior landfill. So what we're looking to have people do is to eliminate the need to go into spaces. Don't be there unless you have to. Retrieve samples remotely, remove components, pulling pumps, bringing stuff up to the surface, doing the repair, put it back down. There's a lot more camera work, a lot of more, looking with mirrors, doing stuff. Sometimes we can configure the confined space. So if you have a septic tank, if you take all the dirt away and take the entire top off rather than just the manhole, then you reconfigured it. It's no longer a permit required confined space. So again, there's a lot of little tools that you can do. Don't accept the work unless you have the ability to do it correctly. So in the case in Superior, the guide rail system was installed after the fatality. It was supposed to be in place before, but that would have allowed them to pull the pump and then repair the pump and then drop the pump back down. Would have been probably easier than crawling down there, and certainly the results would have been different. So in septic tank systems, there's a number of these units that you can just bring all the way up, change the filters, or the cap on the top. You can get a device, you can take that off, and there's tools that you can use to put a new filter in if you don't want to pull it up or can't. Air testing is one of the big elements of confined space, and everything has different levels that they seek. Every gas high settles or is the same density as air or is lighter than air. And so when we do testing, we have to make sure that we give the test, drop the meter down on a line and be able to read the amount. And so the sensor gets dropped down and you have the meter, and then give it adequate time. Continuously monitor. There's a lot of different devices for gas meters. A lot of people use. You'll see it on a lot of construction workers, carbon monoxide meters during winter time. Any of your gas workers would have meters on them constantly. How you ventilate things, kind of, everybody's got a little bit different theory on how to get the best ventilation, but when you do get your readings, get some ventilation in there, make sure that you're getting fresh air in. So it does get really busy on your confined spaces. You have the ladder to get you down. You got the retrieval system. You got ventilate. You got the blower to get areas. You have a standby person to make sure everything's happening good. It is a process, and there's a permit that goes with it. Just showing this looks exactly like the pit that we had at our farm. And the person down there working in there. Anything down in a pit may appear dry, may appear like no problem, but anything that's got metal in it could be oxidizing and using up oxygen. The rusting process, you could have something dying, decaying. Sometimes not having, a mouse or something in there is a telltale sign that it won't support life. But it is something to be cautious about and aware of if you're getting down into these pits and doing service work in pits. Hopefully they've been upgraded and removed, and things are no longer needing to be serviced. So in the confined space definition, is it large enough to bodily enter? Is it designed for continuous human occupancy? And is it restricted entrance and exit? So if you have to climb, crawl, contort, that's what restricted entry and exit is. So what I usually tell people is, how many jobs do you do that involve septic tank work or confined space? Can you do those jobs without entering? How much equipment do you really need to purchase to do it safely? The retrieval system, having two people there because you have to have a standby person, having a monitor. There's a lot of investment into it. So we call that sometimes a stranded investment, where the time and money won't pay back. You just don't have enough jobs. So sometimes it's cheaper to turn down jobs and have other people do the work that are equipped to do it, and get to the more specialty things and take stuff that's more in your wheelhouse. So even in trenching and things, best practice is bid the job, and sort of what everybody talks about is everybody's on the same playing field. If we expect a large utility contractor to have trench boxes, why doesn't the person that's doing water and septic doing the same thing? The hazard's the same, and you still, the life is a life, so you still have to protect people. So as you get bigger houses, you might have unique settings. You might be getting into deeper trenches. There are some rental options depending on where you live, that might have speed shoring or some sort of trench box. If that's a condition of you need a trench box, you're the plumber, make that condition of your excavating company, because they probably have it for other jobs. And the speed shoring stuff is flexible for various sizes, depths, easy to work with. So you can see that you probably need to be a skinny person to get in and out of there, but the walls are supported and they're not going to cave in on you with that. And those are panels that you can haul in a trailer and not necessarily need a machine to put in place. The other thing to be real concerned about is what's underground, also overhead, but the underground is the stuff that you have to hand dig if you get close to the marks. Get the digger's hotline to mark it, and understand that they only mark the utility owned lines. If it's private lines, they're not marked. You don't want to be the person that sets Sun Prairie off in an explosion and takes out the downtown and the fire chief and all the destruction that happened there. Diggers Hotline is having some in-person meetings, and they're this week or this month primarily. They did postpone it because of the Omicron resurgence. And I know Stevens Point is tomorrow. I'm headed that direction. Lacrosse is next week, and Eau Claire is next week. I am not going to the others, so I'm not real sure. Superior has one at the end of the month. There is one more virtual offering, so go to their website if you are interested in that. But we still get people up in overhead power lines, especially if you do have a dump truck coming on and off site. A lot of times they lower the bucket, the bed as they move forward, and they snag an overhead line. Then you get things that you go, I don't know what to do with that today. So kind of a cool picture, but nice ramp did keep them there. So kind of wrapping up and doing the things that are available. We do have posters, we do have stickers, we do try to promote it, give you the 3 things you need to do. We do have on our website, you can download the booklet, you get the quick cards. We do a newsletter every 2 weeks. You can get all the OSHA news. You can delete it if you don't like it. We don't track who it goes to. It is in Spanish too, if you want to work on your Spanish. Probably the biggest assistance you can have is the Wisconsin Consultation Service. And they are free to the employer who asks. Their only request is that you correct what they find, which may cost some money to make corrections. But it's like having a free OSHA inspection, and they're given the same training we are. They are confidential. They don't tell us where they've been. They don't have citations or penalties. So utilize their service if need be. I said publications you can get in different languages, and sometimes everybody has bad days. So like 4 minutes to do questions.
Well, thank you. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
This is Cece. So thank you so much, Mary. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning, but that was a great presentation. I'm sure that people were able to learn a lot, and that was great. I know one question that might come up is, well, so as a soil tester, that's one thing that we do a lot of is soil testing, and we're not digging a trench and putting a plumbing, putting any plumbing in or anything, but we're digging a pit, 3 pits on a property. It's kind of tough to get all of our, I guess, are there alternatives, or are there ways that soil testers deal with that, or alternatives that you've seen other soil testers use? Because we have to, if you put shoring in, we have to look at the soil. We still have to see that and observe that, because that's what we're doing in the pit. And so it's tough when we put shoring in there. And, just what are ways that you've seen people deal with that?
They haven't. Are you a municipal worker? Or are you a private?
I am a municipal worker, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I would ask DSPS what they want you to do in that situation, because you are exposed. We don't have any exemptions in our standard. There's no like for one-time use or for less than 5 minutes you're allowed to do this. So that's
I understand.
Yeah, if you could do it if you could do the soil testing when they're less than 5 feet, if you could, if you're there when it's not as deep, and then that might be one way of doing it, but you need the depth, right?
Yep. Well, right, but that is an option, and that is something that I think some people do, is they'll go down at 4 feet, and then beyond that, maybe they'll do a boring, or yeah, there's other things that can be done to, yeah. So that's an
Yeah,
option.
just control the depth that you're entering, and that might be the best you can do.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. Thanks. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions on the chat. If there is somebody on the line that wants to unmute and just ask Mary a question, that'd be great. Otherwise, I just want to remind everybody that you sign out using your name and your credential number in the chat, and you'll get an hour of continuing education for this. It's just really been a great session, Mary, and we really appreciate it. But if there's anybody out there who wants to unmute and ask Mary a question, she can be on here for a little bit. Oh, here's a question. What is the definition? I got to go back. What is the definition of an OSHA trench? I guess, yeah.
An OSHA trench. We would look at any dirt pile, and then if it's trench, I think by definition is longer than it is wide. You're looking for a definition.
Okay.
And the other thing is, and maybe why the question is versus an excavation. So we get that question when people are building, doing the footings for basements. So you have a, more of a hole, we call that an excavation versus a trench, which is longer than it is wide, I guess. And then the excavation, though, it's trenching and excavation standard. There is a letter of exemption or a letter of interpretation, let's say that, not exemption, that if you have the foundation wall, you go 7 feet out, and then you put a taper to the wall and like a 1-to-1, you put something to the wall. You don't have to have shoring, but we do have a letter of interpretation if you're doing foundation walls, if you're working in that kind of a hole.
Okay. One question was, can a referral be texted in? Is there a number that people can text to if they have, must be enforcement issues, I'm thinking?
No. You can go, what I would do is call the local OSHA office and make contact with someone, and they may give options. But we don't, we don't have requirements to monitor texting. So
okay.
there isn't a text number. There is a, yeah, I would go to our website, find the local office, and talk directly with someone at that office and say, hey, I got some photos I can share, and then you text them or email, and then establish a conversation that way. But there's so much I could get lost. I mean, I don't, I have a phone, but I don't use it. So, I mean, you could sit. I could be on vacation and sit there for a week. So it's
right, sure,
not a reliable system, and we don't have. That's one of the things they haven't required us to do. We do have an email box, and we do have the office, and we do have the 1-800 number. So we do have options.
Okay, great. A lot of appreciation, people saying thank you, appreciate that it was kind of directed for soil testers and septic and plumbers, so that was very helpful. So yeah, that's all I'm seeing on here. So thank you everybody for attending, and thank you Mary for presenting. It's been great. So
all right, have a safe season.